Yes, so my name is Arnaud Poitevin. I'm from France. I'm a peer support worker in France, and I also represent the Global Mental Health Peer Network. I represent France at the Global Mental Health Peer Network. So I'm going to speak about peer support. About peer support in France. Mostly, I will focus on the state of science. So I made a little compilation of scientific articles on experiential knowledge, training and employment of peer support workers. So I'm going to share the screen. I will also, of course, share my experience as a professional. So first, let's deal with the training. How peer support workers are trained in France. This is a little history of peer supporters training in France. So as you see, the movement for peer supporters within organizations in France started in the 80s, as in many other countries, with peer supporters in the field of AIDS and addictions. Then in 2007, we had the first peer supporter in mental health in organization in Marseille, France. And then the nationwide housing first program was launched in 2011 in each cities with housing first program, one or several peer supporters. And the first degree to give a diploma degree to peer supporters was launched in 2012. It's called the Médiateur de santé pair program, Médiateur de santé pair training program. It was launched by the World Health Organization Collaborating Center, together with Paris 8 University. So it's a one-year undergraduate degree. And this undergraduate degree was transformed in 2011 into a bachelor's degree, Médiateur de santé pair. So you have others training in Lyon, in Bordeaux. There is also now a bachelor's degree, and you have other trainings in Aix-Marseille, Grenoble, Angers, and Dijon, and Tours. So this is the content of trainings for the Paris 8 WHOCC one-year undergraduate degree. So the first WHOCC training program. So I will go very briefly through it because it's very dense. So organization of the health system, mental health disorder and medication, somatic pathologies in the context of the mediation work, law, ethics, and social communication, knowledge and discussion around advanced experiences in mental health in Quebec, in Marseille, and in Lille, in northern France. This is the sample also of training module in the Lyon program. So here you have so many training modules. So it's quite interesting because it gets into details of the training of peer supporters. So you see definition of peer support, health in the context of social anthropology, motivational interviewing, psychoeducation, deontology and medical secret, hearing voices, self-narrativity, suicide prevention, autism, neurodiversity, neurodevelopment disorders, medical treatment and shared decision-making, addictions, professional writings, mental health disorders, recovery, community mental health, how to integrate a peer support worker in a team, individual counseling, how to lead an individual counseling, the psychiatric advanced directives. So it's like crisis plans. So how to help write these plans and these directives, how to manage symptoms and advanced signs of a crisis. How to find local resources in mental health, very important, the network. Job coaching, housing first. Lived experience knowledge or experiential knowledge. So you have different ways of calling it. So we call it experiential knowledge in France. Modalities of cure and hospitalization in psychiatry, peer support work, and in medico-social structures. So I just want to make we'll see if there is a question at the end of the presentation on training. But I just want to make a small point on experiential knowledge. So I know it's a notion that is difficult to define. I don't know what is the state of the scientific work in other countries about experiential knowledge. In France, we have some researchers in sociology, especially that have they worked on this thematic, and they got through two main definitions that I can give you today. So definition one is was framed by F. Gardien, a sociologist in France. So I just kept 5 points, main points of the definition. So the definition is that everyone has an ordinary experiential knowledge. So, for example, everyone has had an experience of a flu. People with lived experience have a rare experiential knowledge, like handicap, precariousness. This knowledge is subjective, internal, learned on an objective reality, leaned, pardon, there is a mistake, leaned on an objective reality and external. It is a selective process of elements of reality stemming from an intentionality, moving without problem on a sidewalk for a person who is in a wheelchair, for example. And it targets efficiency, usefulness, and not truth. So how to go from A to B and not saying, I don't know the essence. What is the essence of a wheelchair or of a sidewalk? No, it's very usefulness oriented. So this is not only for mental health, but it's for like experiential knowledge, rare experiential knowledge of people with handicap in general, or in precariousness, or with any kind of disease or handicap. And there is a definition that has been framed by Baptiste Gaudry from Montreal. So it says basically that experiential knowledge for people with mental health issues, disorders, is the following. So it comes from the experience of suffering of a problem. It comes it comes through an experience as a user of institutional services. So of course, hospitals, for example, or doctors or nurses and so on. It comes through lived experience of domination. So there was something linked with domination at some point, like for example, involuntary admissions, constraints, seclusion, restraints, and seclusion. So this is the very strong experience, but you can have something more mild, but there is always something linked with domination. Anyway, there is implied consequences of this experience that can be poverty, for example. We have some psychiatric disorders, but because of that we can become poor, we can lose our job. There is a knowledge of local resources and services. So like when you've been through like many kinds of problems and everything, you know where are the associations, the NGOs, where you as just like the homeless people who know where to get a bath, who know where to get food. So it's the same for us. We can rely on our knowledge of the local resources, where to get medication, where to get counseling, where to get support and so on, peer support. And there is a trajectory towards well-being. So, of course, with experiential knowledge, it does to have this trajectory towards well-being. To become a knowledge, you have to have some distance between yourself and your experience. I'm going fast because we are losing time. So what about employment? So just to know that the fears of other professionals when it comes to hiring peer support workers are most of the time present. So when the program starts of employment of peer support workers, there are always issues and contestations. So what is the interest for a team to include a peer support worker? For the peer supporter, for the people with lived experience, for the person with mental health history, there is a increasing hope for recovery, decreasing fear and auto-stigmatization, and of course, it reduces the readmission to the hospital. So this is quite well known. For the teams, it's introduce people with lived experience, point of view, and skills, reduce stigmatization, increase the level of risk taken. For example, more openness for refusal to take treatment and possibility of decompensation. So, of course, the team can be more comprehensive, more open that someone is not taking his medication because of the presence of the peer supporter. For the peer supporter, there is increasing recovery of his own recovery while giving his support and a recognition of his specific knowledge and experience linked with the illness and with his recovery process. And for close relatives, so there is also increasing destigmatization. So it means that the relatives do less auto-stigmatize themselves also and destigmatize their relatives. By seeing the example of the recovery of the peer supporter. I'm going a little bit faster. So here are some restraints for the peer supporter inclusion in a team. Fear of the peer supporter to be reformatted by the institution, to be changed, their mindset being changed by the institutions. Sometimes perception of lack of skills of the peer supporter. So by the teams, infantilization by the teams, or excessive benevolence by the teams. And sense of the incapacity to help the patient, of the lack of possibility of action when dealing with complex situations. Sometimes, like the peer supporter can find that it's not possible, for example, for this person to get a job or something. So this is some kind of hindrance for the action of the peer supporter. But this is something to be overcome for the peer supporter to deliver its mission in a correct way. Of course, the recovery should be oriented on the objectives of the person, but sometimes it's difficult to be realistic in some situations. So this should be also taken into account. So just to get some statistics, so in the WHOCC program, 2.5 years after the launch of the program, half of the peer supporters stayed in employment. So this is quite a mixed success, but it's still can be considered as a success. And also, importantly, 0 structures out of 12 regretted to have hired peer supporters. So it means that the teams are quite satisfied of having recruited peer supporters. For the choice of services, hiring peer supporters, so they should be recovery-oriented. They should be based on the objective and aspiration of the person. They should network with organization of people with lived experience, should be community-based. The team should agree to integrate a peer supporter. The whole team should be oriented towards recovery and social inclusion. And the management, the reference should be involved for the whole training and integration period of the peer supporter. For the peer supporter, some requirements for the recruitment process. So the peer supporter should have some distanciation vis-à-vis the illness, should have some reflexivity, the ability to be himself a subject of study, of reflection. So this is a very important aspect. He should have the capacity to learn on his or her own path of recovery, including accepting to unveil, when it is necessary only, lived experiences that may be difficult and painful. So he should be able to work in a team, of course, and in a collegial manner. So this is not the case of all the applicants. And it should, of course, have an interest for a helping relationship. And this is some kind of advice for peer supporter position in the team. So it should be an integral part of the team, should not be above other professionals. It should have the same working frameworks than others, and it should not have an external position and not be critical, only critical of its the work of the team towards users. Those are a few additional resources, and I'm all good, I think. I'm sorry for having to have been a little bit long.
I'm going to start. Hi, everyone. My name is Karina Stjernegaard. I'm representing Denmark at the Global Mental Health Peer Network. And I've been working with implementing peer support into the mental health system for the last 6 or 7 years now. We've had formal peer support for 10 to 15 years now. And I'll be kind of taking off where Arnaud left. So we're kind of a great fit, because I'll be talking about how we implement peer support into our formal mental health system. I'm working on a more organizational level. I'm a consultant working with peer support. So I'm kind of preparing the organization to use peer support in the way peer support is meant to be used. And that includes talking to management, talking to all the new colleagues the peer support worker is going to get, and also training the peer support workers to come into organizations and do what we want them to do to get the benefits from this. So I'll not be talking about the definition of lived experiences and the benefits, because I think that Arnaud covered that already. But let's get started. Let's see if this works. All right, there should be a presentation on your screen now. as I said, I work in Denmark on an organizational level with peer support and also within research. I'm also a PhD student, and I also, of course, use my lived experiences within all of these different contexts when I work with peer support. So I'll be covering the do's and don'ts of implementing. And just like Arnaud said, we're also influenced from how formal peer support is being done in other countries. So I look forward to hearing from the Netherlands as well, because we are influenced by you and also a lot by the US. So that's kind of what I'll be building on top of on this presentation. So we have approximately 300 peer support workers formally hired in Denmark at the moment. I work within the Zealand region, the little yellow part. We're a really, really small country, but we are still divided into 5 parts. So I'm covering this part, but we have around 300 formally employed peer support workers within our wards and our outpatient treatment centers all over Denmark. And when I talk about formal peer support, they are paid, and they are paid based on a union agreement. So they all have equal rights. They all get the same pay. They have these regulated working conditions, and they are all permanently employed. These are not projects. This is a permanent part of what we are offering the service users who need our support within the mental health system. And when I say formal peer support, I also mean that every one of these peer support workers have received training on how to do peer support within the mental health system, and also training on what recovery is, because recovery was mentioned before, but recovery seems to be a lot of things. It's defined in a lot of different ways. So I'll also be covering how we define recovery when we train the peer support workers. And I can already say that there are some differences between Denmark and France, because Arnaud just mentioned that they do training in diagnosis and medication and psychoeducation. That's not part of the Danish training, because that's not part of how we understand recovery and how peer support workers will be working within the framework of how we understand recovery. But I'll be covering that as well. So let's just get started. This model, very confusing. There's way too much stuff in it, but this is really a great model to show how complicated it is to implement formal peer support within our mental health system. This model was actually published last year, and even though we've been doing it for years, this is like the contextualization of what we've been doing that we've been waiting for. So this is what I'll just introduce to you first, and I'll just take some of these small bubbles and dig deeper into them as to how we've been implementing peer support within the public mental health system in Denmark. So let's just start with the organizational commitment. That's one part of it. We also have to work with culture, because working with the lived experiences as a profession within the mental health system, where all the other professions have spent so much time in school, at universities, and mental health peer workers have spent time in the school of life, that's quite different. We need to talk about that also on the cultural level in our organizations, and we're also working with organizational strategies. So the organizational commitment is all about what is recovery orientation within our organization. Do we believe that it's possible to recover from mental ill health? Because if we don't, it'll be really hard to work with a peer support worker within our organization. So we need to have some dialogues on how do we understand recovery and what it entails to recover, and how we support people in these processes. And then there also has to be peer support has to be valued. If you don't value this, then it's going to be really hard to actually understand what it's all about. Yeah, it's kind of self-explanatory, the value part. The cultural part is all about diversity and inclusion. Are we as a team ready to welcome someone with a totally different way of being a professional within our organization? That's based on lived experiences and not based on being in school for a lot of years. And then there's also a lot of cultural work in regards to equality, treating the mental health peer worker as an equal part of the team with an equal voice in treatment. And that the team is also open to the changes that follows. The strategies are all about the framework. How are we framing this? So what are our employment strategies? How are we going to pay these people? Lived experiences are something that everybody seems to want right now, but how do we avoid this being tokenism and that they are not paid, or we really don't know what to do with them? When we started peer support work in Denmark many years ago, we were just like, yeah, we're just going to hire them and put them out there and it'll be fine. It's not. You need to be, everyone needs to be aware of why the peer support worker is there, what are their roles, what are they going to do, what are they not going to do, because there is also an organizational job in preserving authentic peer work. Arnaud mentioned it as well. How do we keep peer support workers working as peer support workers and not doing what everybody else is doing within the treatment centers? So let's start with the big why. Every organization should do that when they implement something new, also with peer supports, especially when it's this popular, to avoid that it ends up being tokenism. Like we have a former user hired to do this and that. We need to know exactly why the peer support worker is there. And in Denmark, this is highly influenced by the user movements we have in the 60s and 70s, and they also had in the US and in other European countries, where service users started speaking up. They were actually meeting in group, doing peer support by themselves, talking to each other, like we have something here that we can actually treat the public system when it comes to mental ill health, that you should not be seen as someone that should be left out from society, or be treated differently, but just because you got a diagnosis or because you were within the mental health system for some time. So inspired by those movements, we treat peer support as a way of challenging the biomedical understandings that are within our mental health systems today. So when I say biomedical understandings, that's the left side of the seesaw. We always use this drawing. It's the emphasis on medication, on specific treatments, specific forms of therapy, the emphasis on diagnosis, the emphasis on being an expert as a mental health professional. And we are trying to also include these more personal and social elements into the mental health system. And the peer support workers are a great part of how we are doing that. And I'm going to talk a bit more about what's on the right side of the seesaw, because that's what the peer support workers are doing within our mental health system. So they don't really care what diagnosis you got or what kind of therapy you're going through, because they're focusing on these more personal and social elements of your recovery process right now as a service user. But let's just step back just so we know that we're talking about the same thing. There has been a lot of reviews done on what are the mechanisms in peer support when we talk about peer support from a peer support worker when talking to a mental health service user. So they of course use their lived experiences. They mirror these experiences when they sit with the service user. I've been through what myself. How do you feel being here? And then can have these mutual understandings, what it's like to be within the system, and also what it feels like to be diagnosed, what it feels like to experience different things. And what is also important in the mechanisms of peer support is that it is non-advisory. You don't just sit there and say, oh, this worked for me, so you could probably do the same thing. That's not what peer support is all about. It's more of a mutual conversation where I tell, oh, this happened to me, what has happened to you, and how do you find your own individual path in this quite complex recovery journey that it is to a lot of people. What's also important in peer support is that it builds on a focus on resources. What are you good at? What interests do you have? What resources do you still have, even though you're maybe in a ward right now? And how do we also emphasize these positive changes and not only focus on the deficits and what's wrong right now? Because we know there's a lot of power in talking about what actually works as well. And then there's also an element of what we in Denmark call building bridges, because the peer support worker is great at keeping a connection to your local society, to your everyday life, when you're in a ward, it shouldn't just be about you here and now. It should be about there's a life out there. That's where you live your life. You don't live your life within the mental health system. You live your life out there in the local society. So we need to be connected to that all the time. We need to be connected to the people that's important to you all the time. And the peer support workers are really, really great at facilitating that connection all the way through. And they're also great at building these bridges from the mental health service user to the rest of the staff, because sometimes service users have a really hard time telling what they want, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And sometimes it's easier to say that to a peer support worker who's been there themselves. So it can actually help the service users gain some empowerment in their own process and also in their own treatment to give them a voice. That's also really a really great part of what we get from the peer support workers within our system. So this is how we define recovery. Like I said, there's so many different definitions. I know it's long. There has been a definition from Anthony in 1993 that has been used a lot. We changed the definition a few years ago to a definition that has focus on the social elements. Because when we train the peer support workers, we train them to see recovery as a social and contextual process. Recovery doesn't happen when you're on your own or just in your head or in this vacuum. It happens when you're with other people. It happens when you do what you like. It happens when you have a home where there's control of your finances. You know you have money, you know you have a place to stay, you know you have loved ones around you. These elements are so important in recovery processes. And so this is what the peer support workers will bring into the mental health system instead of having a focus on the more clinical elements. So they will, for example, a peer support worker in Denmark doesn't care what your diagnosis is, because that tells us absolutely nothing about you. They will ask you, who are you? What are your interests? Who do you like to hang out with? What do you like to do? Or what did you like to do before? What are your dreams? And so on. And that also fits very well into the framework that we're working with within mental health, within the recovery orientation within our organizations that the peer support workers are helping us with. I don't know if you know this framework, but it is elements that are of importance in this social and personal recovery processes called SHIME. So the C is the connectedness. You need to stay connected to people around you and to local society. The H is for hope. There needs to be hope that you can actually recover and that you can get better and that people around you are telling you that and facilitating that. The I is for identity. You are so much more than a service user. You're still a mom, a sister, a chess player, a tennis player, whatever. And that's so important also for us to fight stigma and self-stigmatization. The M is for meaning. What's meaningful in your life right now? Peer support workers have so many conversations on this because that's also a driver for you. And the E is for empowerment. Do you feel like you're in control? And do you actually say what's important to you also when you're within this system? Yeah. And like I said, one of the last thing I'll just be covering is what we call peer drift, because this all sounds great and we love to get this into our mental health systems, but it's also very hard because we often place one peer support worker in a team with so many other professionals. So you're like one peer support worker and then there are 10 other professionals, doctors, nurses, occupational therapists, and so on. So it's really hard to stay within your role as a mental health, as a peer support worker. So this is actually a model that I found in an American project they did on peer support. And it shows us the drift that a peer support worker can go through. On the left is the peer identity. So that's what I've been talking about until now. It's the focus on strength, the focus on using your own story, the focus on the service user as being someone who can actually choose their own path, even though sometimes that path is the wrong path and they have to turn around and find a new one. That's fine with us. So that's being in the role of the peer support worker. When they're drifting, They are starting to have a focus on diagnosis, on barriers, on problems. They don't have these stories that are based on their own experiences, but are based on moving into this more of an expert role that we don't want them to be in, because we want to stay mutual and have these mutual conversations. So this is a great tool for our peer support workers. They all have this model as in their pockets, just to stay close to keeping with the peer identity. And I know that this is also a focus for many researchers. That's why I have this quote. I believe it's from a researcher from the US that says our mental health services are underpinned by medical understanding of poor mental health as the product of pathologically disordered mind. So that's the biomedical clinical understanding of mental ill health. And peer workers are being asked to perform paraclinical functions to support that models. And that's not the idea of peer support, at least not in a Danish context. They are here to challenge that and to do something else and to broaden the view of what recovery actually entails. And that you can also define mental ill health in many other ways than by diagnosis, for example. So this is just the ending remarks. To implement peer support, at least the formal peer support that includes wards and outpatient treatment centers, know your big why, know why they're there, and let everyone in the organization know why they're there and what we actually expect from the peer support, so we can all take care of it and appreciate it. And discuss the present recovery orientation. What is recovery within our organization right now? How do we define it? Because if we only define it by people not having symptoms anymore, or people not taking medications anymore, that's a quite narrow understanding what recovery actually entails. And how to have some discussions on how we actually prevent the peer support workers from drifting. So what not to do: don't employ peer support workers without preparing the organizations, because this will be so hard for everyone, for the peer support worker and for the whole team. And you really need to get off on a good foot when doing this. And don't expect this journey to be easy. I think that's also why the first model I showed is quite complex. This takes so much, and it's a lot of cultural work within the organization for this to actually be a success. So I'll just be ending off with this quote. It's my favorite quote from peer support, what has been published on peer support. So it says the peer support is about being an expert in not being an expert, and that takes expertise. This is such a different way of understanding what professionalism is within our system, and that's why it takes sometimes getting used to this perspective being an equal perspective when we discuss what's going on in these mental health systems. So that's it for me, a bit fast, but I think we got there. Thank you for listening.
Well, in Karina and also Arnaud's presentation, I hear a lot of recognition, so maybe I will tell some same things, but in my own words. And anyway, I want to take you on a roller coaster ride with the latest developments in the Netherlands. First, I will introduce myself. I'm a peer worker at GGZ Drenthe, that's mental health care. I'm a lecturer at Hanze University. There's an associate degree to become an expert by experience, 2-year education. I'm vice chair of the Dutch Association of Peer Workers with more than over 500 members. I'm the co-founder of Inbegrepen, and the literal translation is inclusive, but Inbegrepen has several meanings in the Dutch language. I would like to hear you all say Inbegrepen, but we don't have time for that. I was a gambling and cocaine addict from my 15 till I was 36. But of course, that is not what makes me a peer worker, but I recovered from it. That's what makes me a peer worker. And I spent in 2001 a year, and in 2007 a year in that nice building you see. We call it a borg. It was in the forest in a city nearby. And I was a participant of the Gamblers Anonymous for 10 years. In 1994, I became a bachelor social worker, and 25 years later, a master on my 50th birthday almost. Very proud of that. And after my last treatment in addiction care, I decided I wanted to become a peer worker. That was in 2008. And I started as a volunteer in addiction care, VNN. And I also sent a letter to Holland Casino. It's a big company in the Netherlands, owned by the government. And I offered them my services, and I got invited for a conversation. It was a very nice conversation, but they say, well, we don't want to work with peer workers now. And I will tell you something more about that later. So in the Netherlands, we make distinction between experience knowledge, and expertise by experience, because everybody has experiences. But when you reflect on that, analyze them, learn from others and other sources, you get experience knowledge. And when you learn the skills to professional use the experience knowledge, then you are an expert by experience. But I liked the last sentence from Karina's presentation very much. So there's a definition. I'm not going to repeat all the words on the slides. I will talk around it. It's about that your experience gets meaning for the other, and that can in many different ways. In the Netherlands, we teach that there are two pillars underneath expertise by experience. Karina mentioned it also, the client and patient movements were in the Netherlands also, and methodic self-help, because Alcoholics Anonymous started already early 50s or so. And we also have a new paradigm. It's called the herstelvisie, and the translation is recovery vision. You heard about recovery a lot already, but I will also tell you something about it. We make a difference between recovery and Karina called it biomedical, we say medical scientific approach, where the focus is on cure and healing and symptom control. And well, patients and in the mental health care know that when you only try to control your symptoms and never found the core of the problem, you will never heal or recover. And most people never cure or heal from what they have. It's a little black and white, but so you understand it. Most people were reduced to a diagnosis, stigmatized, and even worse, stigmatized themselves. In recovery, also the definition by Anthony is coming from death. How can you get to a meaningful life? And we were also inspired by New Zealand and the United States, of course. Patricia wrote a lot about it. In the Netherlands, Wilma Boeving wrote a lot about it. And I have a last slide. If I have some time, I will show it. And recovery approach is not a method or a protocol, it's an attitude. And of course, recovery is a dynamic process. I always wonder why it's not a upwards line to paradise, but life is like this. Unfortunately, sometimes. Central themes in recovery are empowerment, taking control of one's life, focus on the whole person, shared decision making. A lot of students who start at the Hanze had experience with, for example, a psychiatrist who didn't ask them what they want, but told them how they have to live their life. And when you try to include the meaning of person himself and family and close ones, the treatment will be much better and broader. So the latest developments in the Netherlands, the demand increases, regions, social domain, government, etc. And when I was listening to Karina, I thought, yeah, it's a lot of recovery language. And when I speak to persons with different expertise, and the Netherlands is one of the most richest countries in the world, but even here, 1 million people live in poverty. And when I, mostly generation after generation after generations, and when I talk to people with that experience, they don't like the recovery language, but they mean the same things. So we have to find a different language for some things. Well, as I said, I'm a lecturer, but there are multiple educations and trainings and courses to become a peer worker. And that's very nice. Employing peer workers is captured in policy and laws. Since last year, there's a new gambling law. And in that law, it is stated that companies like Holland Casino have to include peer workers in their policy. I will tell you something more about that. At the moment, and it is why I was a little late for this webinar, I am at the University Hospital here in Groningen, because the transgender department want to work with peer workers. And there was a transgender person with me, and maybe she will get an internship here just to start. But of course, there were a lot of questions. I will talk about that a moment later, because there are a lot of challenges surrounding working with peer workers. Some are at the level of the peer worker, him or her, or the other word, self. Sometimes it's too early. People find out while they work. People realize that their load capacity is too small. When you didn't work for many, many years, and suddenly you have to do a study and you have to go to work, it takes a lot of you, and not everybody can do that. Some people are still in too much pain in their own recovery process. And when you work with people, so I was a cocaine user, and every day on my work, cocaine is mentioned, and I work with people who still use cocaine. Luckily, I'm very far in my recovery process regarding that. But when you are, well, for example, only a year clean, then maybe it's too confronting. Sometimes there's a lot of resistance in the teams where you have to work, or there is cold feet, and because they don't know much. The same in the conversation I had here was the same. The whole team is willing to work with a peer worker, but they have loads of questions, and that's why we had this conversation. In the organization, there are some challenges. Most of the time, there's no vision. What do you want with peer work? There are no profiles, no job descriptions, etc. And when I interviewed my own patients at my working place in 2015, they told me, I will never achieve what you achieve. And that's very sad. But for some people, it is true. They also said, you were a drug addict. You know exactly what I do or want to do, so I can't manipulate you. I don't want to talk to you. And for some people, you are a mirror they don't want to look into, if you understand what I mean. It's too confronting. And I encountered a lot of peer workers that think that every patient, client, civilian is waiting for them, but it's not like that. This is unfortunately totally in Dutch. I added it last night, but it's 10, I don't know if it's a good word, tips, 10 ideas for a good start to work with peer workers. And it came from research I did last year. within 10 cities in the north of the Netherlands, and they had experience with some peer workers, or they had questions or needs, and we translated that in this, and maybe Google Translate will help you, or maybe I can give another presentation another time, or translate it and put it on the website from the GMHPN. So we have, since last year, a new quality system in the Netherlands. It was an assignment by the Ministry of Health, Welfare and Sports for the Dutch associations of peer workers, and goal was to professionalize expertise by experience. And we developed a professional register, a code, quality criteria, complaints procedure, curricula level 2 and 7. Last week I was at Windesheim University, and they developed a master expert by experience. So you can become a master on the topic. And we have a new professional competence profile. The left picture was the version developed in 2013, and on the right is the one from last year, and it's broader. There we already try to use other language, and also include not only mental health care, but also social domain. Almost my last slide. I have a few remarks. So, as I told you, I was a social worker, then I was a caretaker or a service user in addiction care. Now I'm a peer worker, and the fact that I can be honest about myself and my own experience adds an extra dimension in my life as a professional. I don't have to leave things behind, or don't mention them, or even lie about it. I can tell what I want, if people want to hear it, of course. Also, a new thing in the Netherlands, our health system, in our health system, health insurance companies are like the boss, because they pay, and they are willing to pay for peer work. But it's very difficult. It's too much to tell it now. But one of the things they ask for is I use the word hardcore, but I mean evidence-based, scientific evidence, that there are benefits from using peer workers in mental health care. And there was done an international literature review, and there is no evidence-based scientific evidence. So we all think, and when you ask people, they all say they find benefits, but it needs to be investigated, say the insurance companies. From the Dutch Association, we had a meeting with experts in all kinds of fields, and there was a psychiatrist who said, well, when we do this for peer workers, will we do it also for all the other disciplines working in psychiatry, because their benefit is also not investigated. And of course, in the world, in the Netherlands, of peer workers, there's discussion about the new quality system, because is there room for an authentic person? Free space is also a literal translation of vrije ruimte, which is a core value in peer work in the Netherlands. When you adjust to the system world, we were against diagnosis, we were against policies, protocols, and so on, and now we have our own protocols. So that's a little strange, maybe. There's discussion about it, and that's good. I told you that in 2008 I wrote a letter to Holland Casino. I told you that last year there was a new gambling law, and I was very pleased that they asked me last year to get aboard their advisory board prevention policy. So after 12 years, I do a little work for Holland Casino. So when you want to do something as a peer worker, when you want to make a change, you need a lot of patience and perseverance. Do I still have time, Numan? I look at you. Can I do the last slide? This is the last slide. I won't mention them all. I think the presentations maybe will be available. So this is the attitude. So hope and optimism. Unquestioning being there. We call it the presence. Just be present. We don't cure. We don't treat. We don't nurse. We I can't find the right words. But when as a peer worker, when I have an intern, I always tell them to lean backwards and start a conversation, or maybe don't start a conversation. Wait till the patient starts the conversation. Just be there. Use your professional framework in a modest way. Well, I don't want to mention them all. I go back to this.
My name is Zbynek, Roboch. I am from the Czech Republic, and I will present you situation in the Czech Republic. I will not work about the peer work as whole, because I think that all the speakers who spoke before me just like introduce this very well. Thank you all the people, Marcel, Arnaud, Karina. Thank you for your presentations. They were great. And so about introduction. At the moment, I work in National Institute of Mental Health in the Czech Republic in project which is oriented to prevention of mental health, also about education. So and it starts tomorrow, tomorrow in the morning, this project. It's one of my works. Second work, I am part of the team of the Commissioner for Human Rights here in the Czech Republic. And we solve the problem of migrants, mainly from Ukraine in the moment. And my third role is I am part of team of patient ombudsman in our biggest psychiatric hospital in the Czech Republic here in Prague. So these are my roles. And we also have NGO. We just like advocate people in the system, advocate people with lived experience in the system. So it's about me, and now about the presentation. So I just try to work. Yeah, you can see it. Yeah, this is some summary. I will talk about the types, about problems, challenges, what have we done to this day, what should we do in the future. We are under recommendations. Yeah. So you all talk about peer work. We just divided with my colleague to these 6 roles. We can see it's also peer consultant. It's I think it's the most not important, but also more common. Yeah, we also use peer lecturers here at universities for professionals and so on. It's still a problem. We starting it, and there are obstacles from the system. Very big obstacles. Peer researcher, thanks to the VR part, some of us also of National Institute of Mental Health, so we can do research work here. So it's great. I think it's great support for all the peer work. Peer evaluator, we can evaluate processes in the mental health work, thanks to the reform, because last 5 years, there were reform here in the Czech Republic. Unfortunately, 2 months ago, the first period of reform stopped. And it seems that for next year, there will be no such reform steps. But we will make pressure, just like to follow maybe in the year next year. Also peer advocate. That's what I am doing, and also Dana is doing. We just are part of, I would say, we tried to change the system, but at the ministries and so on. Today we have meeting with advisor of Ministry of Health, just like to speak about the priorities for this year for the plan. Also, one of the biggest issue was the peer work and the obstacles we have here. And also, as I think it was Laura just mentioned, that also peer carers are very important. And here in Czech Republic, there are some projects which include also families or family members, which also just like are part of teams. So those just like for types of peer work. What are the problems here in the Czech Republic? We are fighting, I can say really fighting, for establishing peer work and peer also as peers as an official position. And it's really a big problem because we have separate health and social systems. So the question is who will pay it? Either health, Minister of Health, neither Ministry of Social Affairs wants to pay people for such work. There is also, I think we are unique all around the world because we have discriminatory decree, which was of Ministry of Health, which limited health conditions and limitations for work in the health sector. So officially, peers cannot work in the health system because they have mental health problems. It's strange, yeah, absolutely strange. So we are pushing just like to remove or at least this decree, and also the unwillingness of existence of this position. Any ministries just like don't want to discuss about it with us. What are the challenges to change legislative conditions? The legislative conditions in the Czech Republic are very difficult, and if we want to establish position of peer officially, we have to change at least 5 laws. So, and these laws are open once per 5, once per 10 years. So you can see that it's almost impossible just like to establish it. And when we try it, we just people tell us, yeah, maybe we can discuss it, but you need education for this. And when we discuss education, yeah, but you have first just like to have the position. So we are in the circle. If you have no education, you have no position, but you have no position, so you don't have an education system for it. Yeah. So what are the challenges for us? Also, this revision of discriminatory decree, the best would be cancellation, but we want, but it's not possible at the current situation. So we just push the cancellation, but we will be success. It will be success if we just will be able to revise this discriminatory decree, and we are still fighting for establishing of such position. It's difficult, but it will take 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, but we will fight for it, and we will have to change the system because I think it's necessary. And at the moment, 1/5 of population have mental problems here in the Czech Republic. Maybe it's more. So in the future, it will be more and more people. So I think this problem is very important, and we have lack of psychiatrists, we have lack of sisters, and so on. So the peer also would be the great part of the system, just like to talk with the people and to take care about the people, maybe in hospitals and elsewhere. So what's about the first challenges? What we are also trying, what I am trying, it's my goal for this year to establish peer organization, official peer organization in the Czech Republic, which will just push this issue all in the system, which will prepare education, which will prepare all the conditions for this work, which will prepare just like other necessities for just like pushing this position into the system. What we also want just like to increase employment of peers, because if peers are employed, they are employed in social part of our organizations. Yeah, there are some in health system, but thanks to these obstacles, it's very difficult. For example, for hospitals to employ peer workers. So we want to increase employment, but also to get better financial conditions. I think it's also a question of Claudia, or she's talking always about it, that we should be paid for our work, and we should be paid equally. Yeah, I think it's also very important because it's expertise, and this expertise in the Czech Republic is paid 1/3 of normal payment, so it's also not very good. Yeah, so we should increase our rate. We should have standard employment contracts, not only part-time agreements. And as Claudia says, we don't work only as volunteers. And this is very important, but it's strange for all the people in the ministries. We want to people with little experienced peers be in management of the institutions, management of hospitals, management of other organizations, social organization, and it's necessity, I think, just like to be part of management of organizations which are taking care of people with mental health problems. It's very important for us and one of our biggest challenges also. What we have done, I just start with the year 2017 because the reform started in this year. We did advocacy within the reform. We were Dana and me, we were part of minister projects. So we have fortunate chance to talk about the problems, to establish a new system. We prepare relevant materials, unfortunately in Czech. It would be difficult to translate it in English, but I think that we have many materials. We did many meetings and discussions. We participate in creating and establishing new type of services, fortunately. We realized questionnaire survey within people with lived experience and cares. It was 1,000 people, just like we did survey, just like also to make ability to push a system by saying, yeah, look, here was the question, and there are some problems we are facing. We realized several conferences for people with lived experience in Czech Republic, and we prepare one in May this year. We participate in preparing national action plan for mental health. We have just such a document here in the Czech Republic. It's for years 2020 to 2030. And we also realize peer meetings mainly online. What's the goal for this year? Just like on national level, I am also, I forgot, I am a member of National Mental Health Board, which is just like governmental, not organization, but government board for mental health. On the regional level, there are regional coordination groups, which we are, many people with lived experience are part. We want to increase employment and increase also on organizational level, and very important is also individual level, just like fulfillment of needs for this position. This is the plan for this year, together with establishing this peer organization. As I said, we have many materials, reviews, analysis. Dana, our colleague, just did analysis of peer situation in the Czech Republic. This comparison to foreign experience, for example, Austria, Netherlands, US. So what you were talking about, we just also realized from documents we have chance to read. We did survey, as I said, within 1,000 people. We did survey within psychiatric hospital and wards in the standard hospitals about the peers, about the obstacles, which are also the hospitals are facing some obstacles. They don't have financing for peers and so on. We also have this national action plan as a document. Is about 80 sorry, it's evening, so I'm quite tired, and we just published several articles about the problems here in the Czech Republic, also about the reform. Something about us, it's not so important, and our recommendations for people who are facing and trying to push some ideas within the world, just like to pressure, to ensure participation of people with experience on all the levels, governmental level, regional level, individual level. Every level is important, and all these levels should just like speak together. Yeah, and also this meeting I mentioned before, it was we discussed the creation of platform of people with lived experience, which will be established next our meeting with this advisor of ministry. And this is also will be official part, just working group of people with lived experience, just like to tell the system or tell at least this advisor what we need. Yeah, in the field of mental health, pressure for reform processes. I think that in our country it was a great opportunity to have European money for reform. So I hope that all around the world just like should start such reform processes, because there were really hard system, because we were 40 years part of communist part of Europe, and the mental health, there were no question of mental health before. So for last 20, 30 years, it's questioned, but in Netherlands, in US, you just did the reforms 60, 50 years ago, and we started, unfortunately, 20 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. And also cooperation with other countries and global initiatives like global mental health peer networks and alliances of people with lived experience and organization in every country is crucial. So that's everything, and the contact for me and Dana.